All right, welcome everyone to today's episode of the Ari Lewis Show here on Israel National Radio Route Sheva. The show is syndicated as the Messiah Hour on YouTube. Go to YouTube and type in Messiah Hour with Ari Lewis and subscribe to the YouTube channel. It is free to do so. And you can also find me on JApp. JApp is a Jewish application which features hearing from big rabbis, lectures from historians, as well as episodes of this program. You can download JApp from iTunes or Google Play stores or from their website, www.j-app.me. And, of course, you can email me, messiahhour@gmail.com. This is the month of Adar. This is the month of miracles, and perhaps is it the month of Mashiach. We're going to discuss that in today's episode. Here, joining us this afternoon is Rabbi Eliyahu Kaye from Ascent in Tzfat. Rabbi, how you doing out there?
Baruch Hashem, thank God. How are you?
I'm doing well. Now, there's a lot of nervousness in the Jewish world. You have Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu speaking in a couple of days. When he speaks in America, it will be the 13th of Adar, which is the fast of Esther. And, of course, Purim talks about there's a threat from Persia, and Persia nowadays is Iran. So is this something that people should take very, very seriously and focus and daven hard during the Prime Minister's speech?
It's an interesting question. Even without taking under consideration the global happenings that are occurring on this day, which is the 13th of Adar, the fast of Esther, we're told already from the times of Mordechai and Esther that we must and we should take this day with more serenity and regard this day as a day of auspiciousness and an et ratzon, a willing time that Hashem is there more on a revealed basis for our prayers and in order to bring about, like you said before, the revelation of Mashiach immediately now.
Now, when it comes to Mashiach, a lot of people have a certain fear because there's Gog and Magog, which talks about a terrible war where there's a huge percentage of the world's population destroyed, different opinions, but some say as high as 75%. I want to know if there's a way we can avoid that Gog and Magog and not have any destruction before Mashiach comes.
All right, this is a point well taken. As a matter of fact, the concept of Gog and Magog, already from the times of the Tanakh, we've already see it in the prophecies of the Nevi'im, and it doesn't seem to be that much of a happy occasion as we find ourselves in the month of Adar. On the other hand, and this is something that I wish to bring across in order to bring the roga, in other words, that people should feel more calm and tranquil with the concept of Gog and Magog. The Lubavitcher Rebbe has said that in regard to the Second World War and all the atrocities that we went through in the Holocaust, we have actually been yotze, we have actually fulfilled the prophecies of Gog and Magog way beyond the concepts that are found and described in the words of the prophets. So, therefore, there is no real must for us to come to that situation. We've already gone through it.
Okay, so basically, according to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Gog and Magog was the Second World War. So, in regards to prophecies of the 12-second war, the 12-minute war, the 12-year war, how do you think that would tie into the Second World War and that filling Gog and Magog?
Let's put a little disclaimer over here so that people don't come and misunderstand. The Rebbe didn't say that this was the war of Gog and Magog. The Rebbe has said that we have fulfilled the prophecies that are described about the war of Gog and Magog way beyond that which is described in the words of the prophets. In other words, we have the option of definitely being past the war of Gog and Magog. But he does not say clearly that this was the war of Gog and Magog. Any other happenings that we are encountering today, in our day and age, the Rebbe has come and has described, and very clearly he brings as a definition of the preparations toward the greeting of Mashiach. Now, we do see this darkness, and we see it in a very perpetual and a very real situation. But at the same time, we are seeing before our eyes the works of Mashiach in the world, how Arab nations are toppling one after the other, how Arab nations are fighting one against the other. Where do we see such a thing on such a revealed basis? We just look to our neighbors, what's going on in Syria, and all the concept of the war of that the Islamic ISIS is forwarding. It's all in this accord of the revelation of Mashiach, not necessarily going and bringing any harm to the Jewish nation, although very sadly we have seen casualties and deaths within the family.
Again, this is the Ari Lewis Show here on Israel National Radio, Route 7. The show is syndicated as the Messiah Hour on YouTube. Go to YouTube, type in Messiah Hour with Ari Lewis, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Let's talk about Adar with Purim. You know, there's a concept that with Pesach, with the Seder night, we shouldn't look at it as a historical event, something that happened in the past, but something we're currently going through, that we're currently being freed, we're currently having a spiritual high to get into the Torah. Should we view the same way with Purim, that we are currently going through a miracle of being saved, and not look at it as something that happened in the past?
If I may add to what you mentioned about Pesach before we get to Purim, it states, and the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, brings in the Tanya, in his work of Tanya, that not only are we meant to see ourselves every generation, but we're meant to see ourselves on everyday basis as we are going out of Egypt. In Egypt, the exodus of Egypt is a spiritual happening, and it's a dynamic happening, not only on the global basis, but also on the personal basis of every individual. And yes, definitely so. We are told, and this is specifically coming from the words of the Megillah, right? Hayamim ha'ele nizkarim v'na'asim. These days are commemorated and they are carried out. The Ari, apropos to you, Ari, the Ari HaKadosh, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, comes and explains in his writings that the factor of Nizkarim v'Na'asim, when we commemorate any holiday, let alone the holiday of Purim, where we find these words quoted from in the Megillah, we actually are meant to see against our eyes the factor of all the dynamics of that holiday happening on a real basis. So we see a gzeira and a terrible enactment coming from above, coming and threatening the Jewish nation. Where is it coming from? From Iran, Persia, the very same source of the threat of Haman HaRasha, the wicked. And we have the strong belief and the strong security in Hashem that He will again bring us the holiday of Purim, and everything will be flipped around.
All right, now let's talk about the whole flip-around concept, because part of the idea of the mitzvah of getting intoxicated during the day of Purim is not supposed to tell the difference between Mordechai and Haman. So if you could expand a little bit about that idea, is that concept to say that the world is, at the end of the day, a fluke. Things don't really appear as what they are. So if you can tell us how Purim relates to all of that.
There's a beautiful explanation. The Lubavitcher Rebbe brings it. It's brought in Hasidic philosophy in general in regard to the level of intoxication that a person is meant to reach in order to not see the difference between Mordechai and Haman. On a material basis, what you said is true. When a person is shikar, when a person is drunk, they can't differentiate between their right and their left toe. But over here, we're also bringing it to the spiritual dynamic of the dimension of where the revelation of godliness is so great that there is no difference between Mordechai and Haman, because it's all in one unique unity. This spiritual encounter is the level that a person is meant to reach on the holiday of Purim, and it's specifically to reach through joy, through simcha, through happiness. And this is exactly what we said before, that we cannot just read the Megillah. By the way, the Mishnah says very clearly, right, that we cannot read the Megillah as a history book of something that happened once upon a time. Kol hakoreh et ha-Megillah lemafreya lo yatsa. If we read, the simple meaning is, if we read the Megillah with the order of the chapters or the order of the story backwards, from the end to the beginning, for instance, so we have not fulfilled our obligation of hearing the Megillah. The Baal Shem Tov comes and explains that if a person reads the Megillah out of order, out of perspective of perhaps this is something that happened once upon a time, it's a beautiful fairy tale. No. First of all, it happened, and it definitely is a very, very real happening that happened once upon a time. But it's something that we have to see in front of our eyes and that we are going through on a real basis at this moment. This is in the name of the Baal Shem Tov.
Now, when we talk about, you mentioned Mashiach now, a lot of people will say, there aren't that many candidates. A lot of our great leaders have passed away recently. You had Rabbi Vadia pass away a little over a year ago, and there were a lot of Gedol that passed away in 2001. I mean, we've seen a lack of leadership, really. One of my favorite rabbis, Rabbi Kim Spiro, says there's a lack of leadership both in the political world and the religious world. So when people say, how can Mashiach come, there really isn't a candidate out there. We don't know what he looks like. What would you say to that?
Well, as a Lubavitcher Chassid, what do I have to say? When a person comes and looks out and he sees that the activities of Mashiach are happening in the world, we see that it's a very real concept. It's not something that happened once upon a time, and it's not that we're looking for a candidate either. And when we're talking about who could be this candidate or who is this candidate, if we go back for a moment to the times of the Talmud, okay, we see that after the passing of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, so the Talmud comes and says that if there is a Mashiach in our generation, right, if he's, before the passing, so the Talmud says, if he's from the living, so he is Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. Right, and then it says if he is from those that are that passed away, so then this is Daniel Ish Hamudot, the prophet Daniel. So the first level of understanding who the candidate can be is that he doesn't necessarily have to be in our perspective of life alive, that we can see him functioning. Okay? This is the first level of understanding. But if we're talking about another more higher level of understanding, so here we see that the words of the Ari, and in the writings of the Ari, in Kitvei Ari, Rabbi Chaim Vital, it says that just as Moshe Rabbeinu went up on Har Sinai, and he was hidden, he was covered away from the Jewish nation for the period of time that he was up there, so it says, Ani hayom yelidaticha, when he came down, after everyone had already accepted him as the Mashiach of the generation, the leader of the Jewish nation, he disappeared, and everyone went, and they started to go and to serve the golden calf. Then he came down, and it says, Ani hayom yelidaticha, I have given birth to you today. Where did Moshe Rabbeinu come from? What caused them to understand or misunderstand the fact that he is the leader, and he is still the leader? The Satan went and showed Moshe Rabbeinu al mitat dvai, on his deathbed, in heaven. Everyone looked up to the heavens, and they saw Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, on his deathbed. They said, well, how could a person go up 40 days, 40 and not be able to eat, to drink? He isn't the person that we thought he is, and he's gone. And only one tribe of the entire Jewish nation remained loyal to Moshe Rabbeinu. This was the tribe of Levi. Now, in regard to this, Rabbi Chaim Vital in the writings of the Ari says, this will be the same in regard to Mashiach. Mashiach will come and he will reveal himself. Not everyone will accept him as the candidate to be Mashiach. And then he will go into a period of hiddenness. And he will go into Helem and Hester, concealment and hiddenness. And during this period, we will be in this test of emunah, of belief. Is he the Mashiach, or can we find someone else? As you said, many, many great Jewish leaders who in the past have acknowledged the Rebbe as the Mashiach, they're not with us anymore. So who do we actually have left? And if we're going on this level of belief, Here we come and we say that we assert ourselves to the definite 100% understanding that the Rebbe is the Mashiach. The fact that we saw him on the 3rd of Tammuz go into a state of hiddenness, of concealment, that's as far as our perspective, of our eyes of flesh and blood are concerned. But that doesn't disqualify him, first of all, even according to what the Talmud says, that even if it happened on an actual basis, Daniel, Ish Chamudos, the prophet Daniel passed away. The Talmud says he can be Mashiach. And how much more so if we understand it according to what the Rebbe has told us, that he is the prophet of the generation. Before this hiddenness and concealment happened, he is the prophet of the generation, is the Mashiach of the generation, and he has said that we are the 7th generation, counting from the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneir Zalman of Liadi, the founder of the Chabad Hasidic movement. And the 7th generation, the Rebbe says very clearly, is the last generation in Galut, in exile, and the first generation to be in the Geulah, the redemption. If we are the 7th generation, if there is another candidate out there, we are not labeled the 7th generation anymore. We become the 8th generation, because the generation is counted according to the leadership. And since the Rebbe has stated very clearly, in a manner of prophecy, that we, the 7th generation, are the last in Galut, the first in the Geulah, the last in exile, the first in the redemption, it has to be us, and therefore it has to be him, the Rebbe.
Again, this is the Ari Lewis Show here on Israel National Radio, Root Sheva. The show is syndicated as the Messiah Hour on YouTube. Go to YouTube and type in Messiah Hour with Ari Lewis and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Before we go to commercial break, we're going to play some music from Danny Lewis. Danny Lewis is a guitar player and artist here in Jerusalem, and you can find his music by Googling him. His name is Danny Lewis, Danny, then Louis. And you can find him on Bandcamp as well. So take it away, Danny.